Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Thursday. It's September 16th. This will be our chart lesson for today, and this will wrap it up for the week. No chart lessons on Friday, so any over there in you, if you're looking for them on Friday, you won't find one because I've been taking those days off. Trying to do these 5 days a week, it gets fairly time consuming for me, so I stopped doing them a while back on Fridays and taking I usually try to get out of here by lunch and start my weekend early on Fridays. I mean, that was part of why I got into trading and into this business was to simplify my lifestyle. So I'm trying to take a little bit advantage of that, even though I am somewhat of a workaholic. So anyway, that's why no chart lessons on Fridays. If you haven't heard that before, I haven't mentioned that in a while, but I usually try to state that we don't do them on Fridays, but that's the reason, just to give me a break and to let me get out of here a little bit early and people don't realize how much time goes into these videos. It takes me at least an hour to, on average, probably an hour and a half, and sometimes 2 hours to do this video. By the time I record it and then edit it and upload it, there's a lot of work that goes into this thing. So um, I appreciate everyone that's here and that watches it, but just understand that it does take a little bit of effort on my part to get these things done every day. So it's just quite time consuming over time. So anyway, let's move on to the chart lesson. Really, this was a big range day. We had a trend down and a trend back up. We closed right inside, almost in the middle of the range. We missed this. This was the original channel, or what looked like was going to be the original channel, the blue. And so once we broke lower, there were two targets I had. One was to come back and test this breakout area across this resistance here. That's what the red line is. And you can see where there was resistance there early yesterday. And generally when you break out of it, you're going to come back and test it pretty quickly. Well, first thing this morning, we came back and tested that. Uh, that held only momentarily, then acted as resistance, and the final target was basically a measured move. If you measure this target or this range, and let me just show you for those of you that aren't familiar with our tools, that's basically what the blue line down here does, and you can see that blue line, and that would have been your target. We're just measuring the width of the range and looking for a measured move, and that gives you this blue line too. We actually pushed a little further than that, but only momentarily, and then we tested that a few times, pushed back through the uh, support resistance line. It held as support, and we went higher, and then we found resistance right up here at the previous highs, and we closed almost back down at the previous low, or the low of the previous range. So this was my first target, and this was my second target, and then obviously after that, each one of these final support areas would have been your next target. It looks like we bounced it. This one here, yeah, if you run that across there, that's exactly where we bounced. So that's how you find these targets. That's how I do it. And if prices keep going, then we just go to the next. If we'd have kept pushing lower, this would become the next target. And then if that one, then we'd look over here at these. And once you start going up, these are the same targets to the upside. You'd have, this would have been your first target, which we pushed right through, pulled back and tested it. And that's what you'll see. Prices will push through and come back and test it. And if it holds, it'll probably go higher. And that's all prices really do. I talked about this yesterday. They just go back and forth between support and resistance and test them. And eventually one holds and prices can get through. And then the next thing you know, prices are reversing. So just as strongly as we've been down a couple of times, the last 2 days, late in that day, we've made actually we started early today, but by early afternoon, this thing is rocketing up, a pretty strong move upwards. Of course, we took a lot of that back before the close today, but in the big picture, it's a range day. Let me show you the day. Okay, here's our daily chart. You can see we're still inside that little trading range. Prices found, we actually traded down to the low side, back up, down to the low side, and about halfway back up today. So we're still inside that trading range, that little congested area right there. So it'll be interesting to see if we fell out one side or the other and which way we'll go. overall, I mean, you can see this thing, in the big picture, it's still up. So that could be changing. We may have a bigger correction here. Generally, the last few times as I've shown you here, we bounced inside right as we got down to the green, and we haven't gotten down there quite yet because we're stuck in this little range. So we may get that little failed break lower and then rocket higher, or we may fail out the top side and then make another leg down. I don't have it on here, but there's also a bit of a channel that was working down on there. And this is the first close outside, and we haven't pushed to a new low yet, so that's still a possibility. So I'm still leaning to a possible move a little bit lower here, but because we're in this little range, either way we break out, it could quickly fail and go the other way. So we'll just have to see what happens. There's no way to know. And somebody asked me that in the email today. How do you know where prices are going? You don't know for sure. You just know how prices react and how they move, which we teach you that. And then you have to use that and use the support and resistance and find these targets. And then when prices get to them, we don't know if they're going to hold or not, but that's our target. If it holds, we know why. And if it doesn't, we continue to look for the next target. And so that's how this stuff works. And with time and experience, you'll get better and better at it. But I've spent a lot of time here. These videos have been a little long the last few days, and I like to keep them at 20 minutes or less just for my own sake, if nothing else. But we don't want them to get, I don't want you to get too bored with them either. But this is important stuff. I think people will learn something from it. But let's go back to the 2,000 tick chart and take a look at today's trade. Okay, here we are again. We started off sideways and started this big trend down. We actually started off real steep in the green, then kind of folded over into the yellow, then kind of folded over into the blue before we reversed and traded out of there. So let's just extend this one on a little more. But it looks like we got a little close outside right there. This might have been a little bit steeper, like so. It tends to fit better like that, but it really doesn't get confirmed here like that. It doesn't really matter. You can still see it's valid. It just doesn't really help you. You're better off to play these tighter, smaller channels, I believe. This green and yellow one were the major ones, and then this was just one more push down to a new low here. And you could have just played that channel, and it gets a little overshoot and it reverses, and we're off to the races. So, but if you saw the blue one, it's valid. It just doesn't. It depends on how you look at it, really. And you could have seen it either way. I saw it more like that, and it still fits really well like that as well. You can see the midline coming into play. I believe this was it with a little small break right there, but it doesn't matter if you saw it the other way either. In fact, like I said, I don't even think you need it. I think if you play these, you've got everything you need here. Let's just color this one so it's a little easier to see. Make it gray. All right, let's get through these trades. 7 o'clock again comes right as we're kind of rounding out this, coming down this bottom here, and we bounce. And that's a really nice bounce. I don't think you want to go long. You'd be just taking a stab in the dark down here. I actually don't have it on here, but there's a channel working down through here. And you can see that little gap. When you draw your trend line, if you see prices gap over it like that, where there's no overlap between the two bars, that's usually a good sign. It tells you got it in the right place. And so it looks like we get a break right there, move to a new low. But don't try picking these lows. I had that conversation with another trader today. That's a fairly strong trade. So, I mean, if you had proven long-term consistency of prices bouncing here, that's one thing, but just a stab in the dark to try to go long there. Sure, it may work, and if it does, yeah, you get rewarded well, but it'll fail on you a lot of times, so don't take those trades. Here you'd want to wait on a reversal, which doesn't come till here, and you barely get out of that one with the skin of your teeth. This one's not even a perfect reversal because it does move a good bit there, But when it turns up above the EMA on a failed second entry short, it's hard to argue with it. And you can see it, they had to really struggle, but it still worked out. It didn't act like a trap really, so it probably didn't trap a lot of people. In fact, the long probably trapped more people because then they ran it down, because look how fast it drops down and then it reverses. I, I marked this one because I liked it in real time. So I was lucky to, you're lucky to get out of that by the skin of your teeth, and then suddenly it drops. When it turns back down, if it breaks lower there, I like going short with a real quick flip-flop, because boom, that turns out to be more of a long trap than it really is a short trap, and you trap people to the long side. It worked if you went long. If you follow the rules and go long one tick above that, it works. And you might have even tried to get a little better entry, which is the way I would have played that. I let it break higher and drop it limit order, maybe right at the top, maybe a tick in, and that gives you a little extra room just in case you're wrong, but it wouldn't have mattered. You had enough to get out of that either way. But when it turns back, when it closes with that big stem, that's not a good sign. It did kind of push up there quickly and was a very bullish bar for a little bit, so it obviously trapped some people. But they just used that to trap more longs, in my opinion, and then dropped it down, and then they let it go exactly where it was going to begin with, the second leg up exactly to the high. We didn't quite get a measured move, but that's because we overshot it a little bit down here. You can see that big stem down here. A lot of times when you get a big stem, it'll look like that, but if you measured that off closer to the closes, oh, actually that one was a perfect. If you measure that more towards the closes, you can see you pretty much you get a much better reading that way. That way it comes up a little bit short. It doesn't really matter. I usually just measure it from the tops and bottoms, and you'd be surprised how many times it turns down to the tick. I mean, that's within a couple of ticks, 3 ticks there at the most, so that's a pretty good read actually. And then notice when we came down, I measured the measured move. You measure that part of it, and then your measured moves right there. So that's how we got that one. Get this over here out of the way. But anyway, you don't get a chance to go long here, and then you got a new high first entry and another second entry. So there's another failure, and that turns out to be a pretty good move. Move down. I don't know if you'd got a runner on this one. Depends on how you played it, but probably there's probably a good chance you may not have got a runner on that one. It just depends. But you drop on down here and you try to go higher once. And this is not a failed second entry long, but the reason I like this one is because you had this support across here and you come back and quickly you get this lower high and such a bearish bar. That almost looks like a trap right there, and you can see how quick it drops on down pretty fast, and you would expect prices are probably coming down to these lows, and so that's what kind of normally I would say you don't want to go short down there, but when we broke below that, pulled back and turned back down instantly that hard, I like that trade. It's aggressive. It's a little different. It's just a first entry. It's not a second entry or anything. And technically, this is not a new high here. So you really can't look at it as a failure, although it acts very much like one. You're probably going to trap some people right there. So there's also probably a measured move in there. Let's just measure it and see. Yep, you see that measured move, and so that's going to prompt some people to try to buy. Don't ever try to buy because it's a measured move. That's just not a very good strategy, but there's people that do it, and I see people come into the forum and send me emails doing the same thing. We use the measured moves to find us targets, not for buying or selling points. We use them for targets. That's my, maybe I don't say that enough, but people come in using those not just for targets, but they use them for entry points. And yeah, you'll see those bounces to the tick, but I just don't think you want to use that. You'd want to see a setup here to prove that out before you went long. Don't be trying to pick bottoms and tops. You're just going to lose if you do that. But that looks like a trap to me, and you can see it quickly drop down right to the lows, and then we kind of work sideways. It looked like we were going to bounce, but this is why you got to be afraid of something like this. There's no rejection. And notice there's a triple test there too. I had that conversation with somebody. Just because there's a triple test in a downtrend means nothing. If you're looking for a triple test in this move, it's off the highs because the trend is down. And of course, you wouldn't want to go short right into what looks like the overnight lows of a range either. But don't be trying to pick a bottom down here. There is a little bit of an overshoot, but there's no break yet, and that leads to the break and a couple, but it's two strong legs down to a new low, and then it reverses, and then it's even only temporary because we still got more room to the downside right here. So don't be trying to pick bottoms because you're going to get burned if you do. We drop on down here, and you get a first entry, second entry. Not a very good setup there. Not back to the EMA, and then you get back to the EMA. You really just don't get a setup here. There's a lower high here, and it does look a little like this, but you had a break of this and a couple legs down now, so you got to be careful. Although it does look like we're now in this green channel, I'd want it to come back to the trend line here before I'd want to enter. And we actually do come back here, and somebody will probably say, because by the count, that technically we get one little tick lower, and so technically by the count, that's a second entry, but that doesn't look like two legs up at all. And if you draw a channel, it's way too early to be going short. Even where I marked it here, it's too early to be going short. So I still like that one simply because now it looks more like two legs. It looks like you got some congestion and you got two quick legs up and then it turns down. This one I probably should have made it green, but this is a really strong downtrend, and that's really the first time we've even pushed through the EMA a little bit. It's probably going to trap some people, and you can see it drops off pretty sharply. And here that's just a first entry. Then you get a first entry and you get a second entry there, but now you can see that trend line working up. Don't go short right into that. It would have worked, it looks like, but it's not worth risking because you see we run up and make a new high and then one more push. And so now you got a second entry short after a break and a couple of legs up, and you got a little room back to the EMA too. That's still a little aggressive, but you could look at that as a double top. The better to wait on a lower high right there and then a failure right there. But this one I went back and forth about making it green because it is really congestive right there. But a failed second entry right off that key entry point. You know, I like that. Again, I'm going to make that one green because it's just there's a lot of, I don't have it drawn, and some of you probably won't see it, but there's some support across there, and you got to worry about that a little bit right there. See how many times we bounced across there. Really what you have here, let's just back up one more step. Really what you have here is a little range. And technically prices failed out, so that gives you, that's why I like this one and this one. But this one is really right back into it. So it's a little aggressive, but this has been such a strong downtrend. It probably trapped some people right there thinking we were going to go higher, and you can see it drops down pretty quickly. And we actually pushed through the measured move of the range. That's this orange line right here with the blue line underneath it. And we try to bounce, but we really don't, I don't see a good short setup. There is a second entry right here, and it's two legs up, but that's not a very good signal bar. I think you'd want to wait on a lower high, and you don't get it. And you just kind of keep working higher here. And finally, there's a double bottom here, and you get a first entry and a second entry, and you bounce off the previous support. That's a better place to go long. And then if you didn't go long there, or even if you did, you could go long again here. You get a first entry and then a second entry. And that's creeping up this trend line. I adjusted this a little bit later, but originally I had this trend line looking just like this. So that's the main reason I like that one, because it's creeping up that trend line. And then we continue to push higher. There's no entries up here. You're getting too far away from the EMA for far too long. You actually probably would have adjusted this by now. and you get your break and new high, and then we move down again. But you find that's why when I adjusted this lower trend line here. And notice there's two legs down. There's actually two legs in that leg, and then a little two-legged jog, and then another two legs. We came back to the EMA here. You had a second entry long right there. You could have gone long there, but that's a little risky because this channel's still working. But when it tried to go lower again and then turned and went up, I like going long there because it's probably just going to trap some people real quickly. Notice we still did come back and make a new low. So after the fact, that looks a little more risky. But in real time, that looked like a pretty good trade. If you move this over, yeah, that's what it looked like in real time. And you can see you're at this time you're probably playing this tighter channel, and it may even be more like that. I still think it's more like this. A lot of times this outer band will be inside one of these swings up here. And you can see the midlines kind of acting both sides there, coming in back and forth. So you had your break. We didn't quite get a new high, but we hadn't made a new low either. So, but anyway, we come back to this trend line, and even if you still had this trend line drawn higher, you might look at this as the first break and higher low right here. You're coming down, you get the close outside, and you make a new low by one tick. I like going long there. It's a little bit aggressive because it's kind of sideways, but we're probably going to run up and at least try to make a new high, and that's the start of the big move up here. Although we've already had some pretty good movement, it was kind of choppy, but we're steadily going higher. And notice this is a two-tiered correction or two-legged correction here, so that's probably the center of the pattern. And if you measure that first leg, then you get a target way up here. And when this thing just accelerated right on up to the overnight highs and retested them before it sold off. And I like this one just because you're coming down. You get a second entry here, but not a very good setup. And then you get the higher low right here off the EMA and the midline. And notice how we tested that midline once, twice. So you got some proof that midline's holding right there. And so I like that one. And you can see it takes on off again. And I would have measured these two legs as well once you started going higher. And that gets you right back up here to the highs again. We came up a little bit short, but you can see we sold off pretty hard too. So I don't see any more trades up through here. There is a failure here, but it's just too far away from the EMA and right into this upper trend channel. Not a good, very rarely is it going to push on through like that. Most of the time you're going to get burned and get trapped and take a loss. But it runs on up, starts working down, and then you get a second entry short right here. That's the first break of that channel, and that's a pretty good move down. With that second entry short, I like going short there. And you actually made a new high. So first entry, and then we push through the EMA and pull back, and you get a second entry long right there that fails. So that's a failed second entry. And you would expect prices with that overshoot are going to at least come back to the trend line and maybe overshoot it the same amount. So you still got room for a lot of down movement there. So on that trap, I like taking it. And that takes you into 2 o'clock basically. So that's what I saw today. These days are tough. When it's this bearish and then suddenly switches and it's super bullish, these days are difficult. So there's a lot of volatility. You know, and we're really in that. If you go back to that daily chart, just notice here that we're in this tight. We're in this tight range, and that's what's happening here. Where prices are finding support here, and they're finding resistance here, and they're just stuck in there. And so at some point, it's going to break out one way or the other and probably fail, and then take off rapidly in the other direction. Or it may fail out. Sometimes it'll fail out both sides a couple of times before it decides where it's going. I just think we have some more room left to the downside here still. I could be wrong. There's nothing here that says that for sure. I'm just looking at where we've bounced the last few times. We've at least gotten to the green. So I would expect that prices are going to at least try to trade down into this green, maybe pass through it before we reverse again. And we could make another leg down now that we got this one leg. If we get a little correction here, we might make a whole nother leg down. So we'll just have to see. It's really tough to judge where we're going from here. The overall bias is still up. Trust me, this uptrend is not. There's nothing here yet that says this uptrend's over. It could be ending, but there's nothing that says that it's over here yet. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for today. I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you had a good week. We'll be back again to do it Monday. I'm done for today. Done for this week. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com. We'll see you next time.